What is going on, team? Welcome back to the channel. Prep vlog number 1,047. I actually don't know what number it is, but we're rolling these prep vlogs. Also daily, weekly updates, just to keep you guys in the loop with what's happening and how we're doing. So in for pull day 2. It's my second pull day for the session. Sorry, for the week, second pull session for the week. This one being primarily just back and a little bit of delts. My earlier pull session in the week is more bicep dominant, so it's 2 pull exercises. Actually, I think it's only 1 pull exercise, some rear delts and some biceps, where this one is more primary pull. I've got like 4 back exercises, I've got a couple of delt exercises and no biceps, which I think is a great way to structure it. You can only have so much emphasis in one session. I think like a couple of muscle groups is really nice. You can really give a lot of priority to the muscles you're trying to train, and then everything else is just kind of tacked on as needed. But I think this session is a really good indication of how I like to set up programs, especially when we're trying to tack on extra volume. And I've spoken about this before in terms of higher volumes like are needed at some point, but having a higher frequency of movements or exercises that you use throughout the weeks allows you to kind of do more volume. So it's basically like more volume, you can kind of spread it out more frequently. And in turn, higher frequencies allow you to do more volumes because you recover better. So in this instance, like with delts, for example, when we look at our overall volume allocation for delts, if we're like thinking about it logically, delts kind of pick up a lot of, I guess what we would call like indirect volume from pressing and things like that. And then we need to tack on some extra volume, more so for the lateral and rear delts, probably more so lateral delts because they don't get stretched or put under tension in any meaningful way with any pressing or pulling movements, where the front delts do get a lot of contribution when you're pressing, especially incline pressing, and the rear delts do trained a lot when you do like back exercises as well. So a lot of that volume kind of accumulates in the background, where lateral delts doesn't really, unless you're doing specific overhead pressing, and even then, not really. So we do need to have some more lateral raise variations in the training week. And a great way to do that is just kind of do it more frequently. So I've got like 4 upper body sessions, and I've pretty much got delts in every one of those sessions. So I'll have like some primary overhead pressing, I'll have some lateral raise variations, and I'll have some rear delt variations throughout the week. So it's a nice way to kind of accumulate a little bit more volume, but allow that volume to be done in a manner that's not too fatiguing, because it's only a couple of sets done every second day or every other day. So pretty easy. But kicking this one off, it's old school, man. Seated cable rows. I feel like a lot of people don't do this anymore. 2 working sets here, 8 to 12 reps. This one, again, the grip width doesn't matter. I feel like the opinion on this on the Optimal Bro side of TikTok and Instagram has changed. It went from like, pronator grip, wide grip to, never use the narrow grip handle, which, every sort of handle and position has its place in a well-designed program. So for me, I just feel more comfortable using the sort of shoulder width grip handle, and allows me to get a nice big stretch. Again, many trains of thoughts on this, whether or not you stretch really far, whether you stay locked in, I don't think it really matters. I think the main thing to think about here is just avoid using heaps of momentum. So for this, I actually like stretching quite a lot. And then as I pull back, I'm thinking about initiating the movement with my elbows out at around a 45-degree angle to target more of that upper back. And that's really it. It's a really great way to get a lot of stimulus to the upper back. I think minimize momentum, make sure technique is good, and that's really it. But we'll jump in. Whoa. So a couple of tips with the seated row, just around technique, execution. You probably would have seen like some of the OGs training in the gym, like Jay Cutler, Branch Warren, some of those guys, names come to mind. And the way they did the seated row was like they stack it out, just use the whole stack. Pretty loose technique, but just moving weight. Where I think obviously a lot of the emphasis on training has shifted more towards like stricter technique, more sound execution. And I guess it's really important to kind of understand that both have their place. You're gonna build muscle regardless, you know, which technique you use. And there was actually a cool study they did, it was pretty recently actually, where they looked at like whether or not loose form or strict technique resulted in more muscle growth. And there was no significant difference between either, kind of alluding to the fact that you can kind of do both and build muscle. So the only caveat being that with strict technique, with strict execution, it does make it more predictable in terms of our progressions. So when we look at how we progress our loads, is it just because you used different techniques, i.e., you know, you're swinging around, maybe you reduce your range of motion, using lots of momentum to just kind of progress the load, where it makes it a little easier to track your progressions when your like technique and execution is standardized, because you know that the only thing kind of progressing is the muscles that you're training, rather than just changing things to lift heavier loads. So while I understand they both have their place, I'm more of an advocate of more strict technique and execution, just for that sake, for progression, but also for injury management, because it can be very easy to go down the rabbit hole of just trying to lift heavier for sake of progression, using looser technique, shorter range of motion, those types of things, and you end up getting injured. So especially with this, like the last thing you want is to injure your lower back or something trying to lift really heavy. So in any case, strict technique, always my preferred method. All right, so on to exercise number 2. So 2 sets of horizontal rowing, 2 sets of vertical pulling, and then I've got another 4 sets of horizontal rowing. So lots of like horizontal emphasis this session. But moving into the pull down, I think this is a fantastic exercise that everybody should be doing. I feel like the bilateral lat pull down kind of got poo-pooed for a long time. Again, like TikTok optimal bros, you know, overcomplicating lat training. Where if we think about lat training, you kind of, you know, you can train things in the sagittal plane and the frontal plane, single arm bilateral, grip width doesn't really matter too much. I think just whatever feels comfortable is the most logical answer. So I love using the lat pull down. I love doing it bilateral. I love doing it unilateral. I think they're both fantastic. This one, just because we're in a cool gym today, they do have some cool attachments. Again, does that really matter for most people? Not really. So these are the mag grips. Neutral grip, I feel like that's the most comfortable grip for me, especially when I get into that sort of top position overhead. It feels nice. So nothing magical about the grips. It's just whatever feels good for you. But 2 working sets here. I didn't hit the top end of my rep bracket last week at this load. So basically I'm just gonna keep the load the same and just look for rep progressions here. And I talk about this a lot in terms of progression, but the way I like to look at it and the way I like to structure it is, at least on the first set, I would like to hit the top end of my rep bracket. So this is programmed for 8 to 12. I got 10 on my first set last week. So arguably I would like to get 11 or 12 this week. And then my second set, I'm not too concerned. Generally at my second set, I'll take to failure, wherever that ends up, I don't really care, so long as I'm taking some progression in that exercise. So this one, if I get an extra rep or 2, fantastic. Then all I'll do next week is add load and just try and do the same, chase reps the weeks after. All right, so that's 12 reps. 2 reps up from last week. So happy to take that progression there. Recovery's been really good this week. Energy's been really good this week. Especially after a rest day yesterday, I feel adequately recovered. So that felt nice to take that progression. So this one, might try and get close to that. Sort of end up maybe 9, 10, 11 reps on the second set, I would imagine. But again, all I'm doing next week then is just taking load progressions on that first set to ensure that I'm continually progressing each week. And like, it doesn't need to be a lot. I think if you're in a good gym that has either the micro loaders on the machines, go up by 1 or 2 kilos, it's progression, right? If you've got something cool like a gym pin, you can add a gym pin on, a couple of kilos on, and literally just keep progressing in that fashion. It's super simple, super easy, and so underrated. All right, so moving on to exercise number 3. Actually got the prime chest supported row, which is a fantastic piece of equipment if you have access to it. But one of the questions I always get asked, especially when I use like the cool prime pieces with like variable loading pegs, or the ability to kind of change the resistance profile, is like, what's the point, or why is it different? Why does it matter? Or how should you use it if you do have access to it? So this is something I learned early on. A couple of names that come to mind: Jordan Peters, trained by JP. Go check him out. His YouTube channel is fantastic. He's a very, very smart guy. Well ahead of his time in terms of the things he was talking about 3, 4, 5 years ago. But basically the rationale being that we have the ability to produce force more in the length and range later in the workout. So you maintain a lot of strength in a length and position. And this is something I've talked about at length, around like exercise selection. So you will typically fail in the contracted or shortened position on exercises, where exercises later in the workout, you could probably do more length and bias stuff. So especially with this, like I've got 4 working sets. So with the prime piece, we have the ability to load like mid, lengthened, and shortened. So generally speaking, like I'll load majority of the first couple of sets. So this one I'm doing 4 sets. I'll probably do 2 sets more in that mid position. And then as I move into the 3rd and 4th set, I'll just take 1 plate off and move it into the lengthened position. So by the end of the 4th working set, I'm at sort of 50% mid, 50% lengthened. Or I might even go a little bit further. I might start all plates in the mid, and I may just progress it so by the end of the last working set, I'm doing pretty much all in the lengthen. So I do have a little bit more ability to produce force there. So this will be fun. It's gonna be hard, gonna be heavy. I'm gonna keep the load the same as I did last week. I had 100 kilos on there, 4 plates. After doing those 2 exercises, 4 working sets already, I'm pretty fatigued. So I might end up keeping all of this pretty much length and bias. So we'll see how it looks. Yeesh. Yes. All right, so we got through that marathon set of chest supported rows. So interesting point that I was bringing up, and it's actually cool because one of the guys in the gym overheard me talking about it. So I thought I'd explain to him and then I'll explain to you guys so you can hear it. But the rationale was that as we get through those sets, fatigue starts accumulating, like I said, in that shortened position, so it does make it harder to contract. So you will start failing towards the end of the reps. So one thing that you can do with those prime pieces, any variable resistance machinery, is just start moving plates more into that lengthened position. So I basically started with like 3 plates in the mid, 1 in the lengthened, and I just literally went 1 plate onto the lengthened every set. So by the end of the 4th set, all of the load was biased towards the lengthened position. It was really fucking hard off the bottom, but because you still have a lot of ability to produce force there, you can still get those reps, and then it does let off as you get to that mid and shortened position, which feels really nice. So I ended up taking like load and rep progressions throughout that entire 4 working set, so it's really nice. So majority of the back stuff done. I've just got some some straight arm pullovers to finish off, so some more lat bias stuff, and then like I mentioned, some delts to finish off, because we do have a little bit more delt volume across the week. Pull session done. Finished with 2 sets of lateral raises throughout the week. I've only got 2 variations that I use. I've got the cable, like cuff crucifix raise, and then I've got like a lying cable raise, which I think in terms of exercise selection, it's all you need. There was actually a cool paper that came out quite recently, looking at like dumbbell versus cable lateral raises and which one was better for lateral delt growth. Turns out it doesn't really matter. I think in terms of like complete development, it probably makes sense to use both. Whether you do that in the same week, you might have one day where you do dumbbell lateral raises, one day where you do cable lateral raises, or if you just do it program to program, you might do dumbbells in one program, next mesocycle you might use cables or vice versa. So I don't think it really matters. It's just, again, choosing variations that suit you, that feel nice, that don't cause any pain, and ones that you get a good stimulus from. I think that's a thing that's really maybe misrepresented in a lot of social media content these days, is like people discounting like the pump, and they're like, oh, a pump doesn't matter, don't chase a pump. Yeah, totally. Don't chase a pump. Getting a pump isn't indicative of muscle growth, but I think some sort of disruption at the local musculature that you're trying to train is a good thing. So if you are feeling a burn, if you are getting a pump, there is obviously disruption happening. It means you're probably getting good stimulus to that muscle group. So probably a good exercise to use in your program or in future programs, and something to take note of as you progress through different mesocycles. You can keep exercises that you get a really good pump from, that you get good stimulus that you can progress with, and then maybe you remove exercises that you don't get as good of a stimulus pump, or any of those other things mentioned from that exercise. But that's it. Pull session done. I'll see you guys tomorrow for push. That's going to be a fun one. I got some PBs to chase on the incline Smith, so it's going to be a hard session. But see you guys tomorrow. Do all that fun YouTube stuff. Like, comment, share, subscribe. See you tomorrow.